Hey everyone, welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup, where we're doing 30 to 60-minute meetups once a week every Thursday. Today, and I'm going to start off with a confession. The confession is that I've worked on case studies for a long time, but I've never really been that thrilled of the resulting work that I've created. So I'm really excited today to have Margie Agin. Margie is Chief Strategist at Centerboard Marketing, and she's going to talk about case studies and how we can optimize our case studies and make them better. So Margie, thanks for joining and take it away.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm in Falls Church, Virginia, which is just outside of DC. And one of the very few cool things about the pandemic is I'm able to join these virtual groups that are from different areas of the country. So, which I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do or even known about. So thanks for letting me join your Bay Area group. I'm excited to be here and talk about the topic of case studies. It really is sort of like the meat and potatoes of, especially in B2B marketing, right? So it's something that all companies typically find themselves doing at one point or another, but so it's a good opportunity, I think, to do a deep dive on the topic. A little, just quickly before we dive in, like a little bit about Centerboard and me, and why this topic is sort of near to my heart. So Centerboard is a marketing strategy and content marketing consultancy. So we focus on mostly B2B technology companies that have complex products and services that are often difficult to distill and explain. And so what we do is help companies find out, discover what makes them different, and then find the words to say that. So what that means in practice, we start off with the messaging infrastructure, with messaging maps and brand identities, brand voice guidelines, messaging structures for storytelling, and kind of the proof points to back that up. And then we take that kind of infrastructure, turn that into customer-facing content, like web copy is usually kind of the core of what we do when a company is sort of repositioning and rebranding, but also ebooks and case studies and other types of materials that are for campaigns and sales enablement tools. And then we also do workshops. Normally I have like a little icon of people here, but now we're all virtual. So I made we do virtual workshops on writing trainings, storytelling trainings, and help companies roll out that new kind of brand definition and messaging guideline to both their marketing and their sales teams. So the reason I wanted to talk about case studies is a little bit about me before I went into more of the content development and branding side of marketing. I was in market research for a long time. And so I worked for a company that our clients were sort of niche providers of various types of technology or manufacturing systems. I mean, everything from like milking machine vendors, right, to companies that made very thin paper for cigarettes and Bible paper. Like there was a whole range of these really sort of niche and obscure industries. And what we did was look at their competitive market, how their customers buy, possible acquisition targets. And so I was interviewing, dozens or hundreds of people for years, basically about anything and everything. And, looking to try to find the story and the nugget and kind of the story behind the story about how they make decisions and how they value the products that they're purchasing and, how they measure success. And so I started developing kind of this framework for how to interview customers and kind of bring their story to life. And no matter if you think, Dennis and I were talking about this on the phone the other day, you may think that this is not necessarily an industry that is very interesting or that you may find interesting, right? But to the person you're talking to, it's their life. It's like what they do every day, all day long. So it's extremely interesting to them. And so if you can kind of tap into that interest level, then the good stories sort of start coming out, the human stories of success. And that helps to make an amazing case study. So, we kind of mentioned they're the meat and potatoes of especially B2B marketing. And I think that's increasingly so because, as we've probably all seen, buyers don't trust brands. They don't trust things as much that come from the company itself, but they do trust people, right? They trust the people within the company more than the company logo, and they especially trust external perspectives of people that they know or that they align themselves with. So 75% of buyers or more rely on case studies at some point in the process when they're researching their purchases, especially in a B2B environment where it's a long purchase cycle and there's a lot of risk and decision makers involved. And so if you're looking at different types of content compared with almost anything else, case studies really convert extremely highly. So if you can get a case study right, then you have a very good chance of using it within the sales cycle to kind of accelerate that decision forward. However, it's easier said than done. And there's several kind of obstacles or stop signs along the way that make it difficult for companies to execute on the idea of having case studies or regular case studies. The main one that I see, particularly with the larger companies that I work with, is the lack of ownership or process. So especially in organizations, right, where there's maybe a product marketing team, a demand gen team, a content marketing team, a brand team, customer success team, everybody has a piece of it, but sometimes nobody really owns it. And, it's funny, salespeople are often the first ones to say, I wish we had more case studies, right? I can't sell to the healthcare market because we don't have any case studies or any logos in the healthcare market. But yet, when you go to them and you say, okay, well, do you have any customers that will talk with us? We would love to do some interviews with customers about the healthcare market. Oh, no, none of my customers would possibly talk, right? Or they kind of drop, they sort of drop the ball there. And in part, I think that's because often salespeople and some of these other groups are not incentivized necessarily to talk on an ongoing basis to customers, right? We're sort of all about the hunt and bringing new customers in the door in the demand generation part of the cycle, but not necessarily to then know about what's going on with them after the fact and continue to communicate with them. So, some organizations, and I think this is growing, kind of have this customer success function to focus on that. But in many organizations, it's sort of like this hot potato ball that nobody owns. The other thing that happens a lot, especially in my world, I work with cybersecurity companies, and cybersecurity companies often are afraid to talk publicly. So you may often get, somebody who's willing to talk to you, but then not put their logo on it publicly. Or you've got someone, you go through the whole process and you interview them and you think you have a great case study and you spend the time writing it and designing it. And then they say, oh, I need to talk to my legal department. And then it gets stalled, right? It's dead in the water and you have no visibility or insight into whether it's ever going to see the light of day. And that's, I've been bitten by that. It can be very frustrating. And so getting kind of that approval up front and every step of the way kind of just confirming what the process is, whether you're going to be able to use it for your own internal purposes or whether it's something you can say publicly is also really important. So if you're lucky enough, right, to get through these hurdles, then you got to make the most of the opportunity, right? And to finally be able to talk to a customer and get them on record, ideally that's your opportunity to sort of tell the story from the customer's perspective and bring that story to life. So the other thing that I see, unfortunately, is some companies really squandering that opportunity and kind of, burying the lead or burying the case study or, not asking the right questions to really dig into the details of the study or the customer story. And that's a shame because, it took so much to get there. And costly, especially if, sometimes you hire a video crew and you're headed out to the field and you have a huge opportunity there. So today I thought, kind of broken this presentation into a couple of different segments. The first piece is to kind of address each of those obstacles. So the first piece is, how can you develop a case study pipeline, kind of an engine and a process, so that you can kind of have this ongoing pipeline of case studies. So we touched on this a little bit before, but defining and getting buy-in to sort of who is ultimately responsible. Which group is it? Who's on the hook for it? Who has it as part of their, their MBOs or their quarterly goals? A lot of people can touch it, but somebody has to be the ultimate owner. And then you've got these other people who are usually involved in the process. So making sure that they know what their roles are, their responsibilities are, and they're prepared to do the work. So, and these could be the same people, right, in a small group sharing roles, or they could be different people depending on the size of the organization. But you have the identifiers who are finding the stories. That's their main responsibility. Who's going to do the interviews? Who's going to be the writer? Sometimes that's the same person. Someone who's going to review it and make sure this is the story that matches kind of the messaging that the company wants to highlight. And then other types of design teams, video teams, graphic designers. And making that decision, whether it's internal or third party, is an interesting one. I have found that, because I've been on both sides of this, I also worked in-house for about 15 years for Cisco and Tandberg, which was bought by Cisco, and Blackboard. So I did a lot of this as an internal marketing lead, and I've also done it as an external marketing consultant, as an independent third party. And then when I was in the market research world, I was in a different situation altogether, where they didn't even really know who we were. And we weren't calling on behalf necessarily of the company, but we were doing some external research. So I have found that people open up more to third parties often than they do to the brand itself. Sometimes they feel like, that maybe they're hesitant to actually share some of the negative stories that they have, encountered, or the negative experiences. And so you don't always sort of get the truth, like the juicy truth. You may not decide to publish that, publicly, that piece of it, but it is good to know, and helps you just get an external perspective on the company that you otherwise would never get if you only used internal people. And then the operations team. So the companies I've seen that really do this really well, that are able not just to create the pipeline of case studies, but also make sure that companies know that salespeople and marketing people use them, have some kind of an operational link. Maybe it's with Salesforce or some other kind of a central hub where they can store these case studies, where they can mark which company participated, right? Or whether they're willing to participate, or whether they're willing to be a referral. So you need some link with the operations team, and then your legal team to have kind of a terms and conditions, or some kind of a legal document where you can get the approval and have that piece of paper, stored in a file, so that up front what the company is willing to do and what their process is to go through. Then we to set up a process and decide up front, how often are you going to do them? Is your goal, 1 or 2 a quarter? What's a reasonable goal, especially if you're starting from zero, to try to do every month and go through this process? A mix of formats. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but to decide, especially for your budget, or is this a blog? Is this a video? Is this a designed, 2-pager? How are we going to use this? If you're going to offer any kind of incentives, either to the customers for participating, or for your internal team. Like I've worked with companies to do contests for the sales team, right? To say, you get an extra spiff if you're able to bring a case study to the table, as something to sort of put it on their radar that they're going to participate in this program and that they have some skin in the game. And then I added this sort of try not to pepper. And I have mixed feelings about this one, but I'm starting to come around to think that the best thing is thinking ahead of time and getting sort of the buy-in ahead of time from the customer when you first approach them to say, these are the 6 potential ways that we might use your case study. Are you okay with, your logo on the website, a quote, a video, a webinar, speaking at a conference, being a referral, all sort of these different things, and have them kind of check off what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. Even if you don't end up executing on all of them, at least you know sort of how far they're willing to go. Rather than going back to the well constantly, this month we want you to do a quote, next month we want you to be in a press release, and the next month we want you to, now we're coming out with a video crew. It's sort of like you can exhaust them quickly if you're going back to the same people again and again. Okay, so how do we get our customers to say yes if they're a little hesitant? Like the cybersecurity companies I was talking about they don't necessarily want people to know what tools they use to secure their technologies. So they don't want to be public about that. So if that's the case, you may have a harder time with some technologies than others in having customers willing to come forward. So one way to start, at least to sort of separate who are the good stories from the ones where it's not even really worth it to continue to go down that road, start with sort of the softer ask, which is asking for some non-public feedback, as it's still going to be valuable for your marketing program, for your personas, for building on the case study questions that you need to ask others. So I sometimes start with a soft, kind of the soft ask is like, could we just talk with you about your experiences? We just want to learn. Maybe you have an advisory panel where it's behind the scenes, it's not public, it's just, 5 or 10 people. Referral programs could be, if we call you, are you willing to take a phone call from another prospective customer? Again, they're not publicly putting their name on it, but they're willing to take an offline phone call to sort of offer their advice. Peer reviews, Gartner, G2, some of these programs are very much a part of the decision-making process, especially for B2B tech buyers, but there's no obligation for a customer to actually put their name to their review, but it still helps you start to build that external third-party validation. Here's an example of how a client that I work with used these peer reviews on their website. So they took the quotes, they took the name of the job title and the industry. They attached their own photos to them, right? And they don't have the names, but it's still, at a glance on a website, is that additional social proof that gets people interested in reading more, right? And then they click right to the Gartner peer reviews where you can dig in and see a lot more. So incentivizing customers. Now, of course, some customers are not going to be able to take incentives, like federal government customers could never take monetary or other kinds of awards. But there are still many ways to help customers feel like they're also kind of getting something out of the deal, and it's not just a one-sided ask. So and I've only seen, really honestly, one company successfully do this, so I'd be interested to hear if anybody's had this experience. But building in an obligation or an agreement to participate in a future case study into a contract. Maybe it's a discount or a renewal, right? Or an additional services that somebody gets. And actually, having the salesperson negotiate that up front before the deal is closed. A wish list item, again, I've seen it done, but you're probably not going to count on that. So some of the other successful things that that I have tried have been, get them to speak, build a forum, right, or invite them to your forum, for them to speak about sort of their agenda, their platform, help them build their own personal brand. They get some benefit from that, and they're not necessarily just talking about you and how much they love your brand, right, and why they bought you. they're offering advice from their own experience to other people who are like them, right? Who maybe are considering the same kind of purchase or having the same kind of struggles with implementation. And it allows them to be an expert, right? And again, build their own kind of, portfolio and brand. And you're just kind of providing a platform. So one is have them speak in an event session or a panel. Record it. You may not, or probably don't want to use the whole thing, in other ways, but at least you'll have it if you need to grab a quote or pull something out from it. Invite them to be a guest blogger or even offer a quote within a blog that you've written, right? So that they can be part of kind of your blogging platform. Nominating them for an industry award. So instead of always putting yourself forward from an industry award, maybe you're nominating one of your customers and, again, putting them forth as sort of the hero, but you're in the background as the guide or, the technology that helped them reach that success. Or design your own customer awards program. So it could be, your own customer event. When I was at Blackboard, we had an annual, it was called BB World, an annual customer kind of conference, user conference, where all the Blackboard users, educators and technology people got together every year. It was, a couple thousand people, and there were lots of sessions. So we had a front row of our customer ambassadors who had special badges, with the ribbons, and they were always given a front row seat in the main keynotes and so forth. And I think they might have also gotten a free ticket to the event. I mean, not their hotel and all that shebang, but at least, they didn't have to pay their way. And their obligation was to write about it, to share about it, to kind of write about their experiences. And we didn't tell them what to say. It was not scripted. It was just the idea that they would, be an advocate and ambassador and help to kind of amplify the social media aspect of the event through their own platforms. So that was an incentive for them. Part of that was also a customer awards program, right? So, and I've seen this with a number of companies, whether it's event driven or not, where you have an awards program. You ask your customers to provide their story and evidence of their success with an incentive to win either acknowledgement or a prize. And as part of their submission, they're agreeing that the information that they send can also be used externally, right? So this is one of my clients, Hobson's, which is an ed tech company. They have an annual Education Advances Award, which they have for 3 different areas of their business. So they get, hundreds of higher ed institutions and K through 12 schools submitting. They have an external board of reviewers. So the company itself doesn't actually choose, who wins the contest, but they have an external group of, education thought leaders, and those people are the ones who get together and rank and choose the award winners every year. And so then what we did was we took those stories from the award winners and we were able to capture them in a number of ways. So what you're looking at is sort of little snippets from their resource center where they've got blogs, they've got press releases, they did a webinar series, they did little video captures. So there's so many different ways to kind of, package and repackage these kinds of stories. And we had all the meat of the story came from the submissions that the customers provided themselves. And while that one, there's a lot of heavy lifting on the part of the customer because there's an incentive. Generally, I would say you have to take on a lot of the responsibility to do that hard work. Right? Even though the customer in that example gave the basic story, we were the ones that packaged and repackaged and did the promotions, right? And there are many times when I've just been on the call with a customer for half an hour and, I write it, they approve it, or I draft a quote, right? And then all they have to do is approve it. So, even to the point of giving them an email that they can send to their boss or their legal department to say exactly how this is going to be used and get that approval. making it as easy for them as possible, because you're asking them for a favor essentially. So you don't want them to have to do the hard work. Okay, so then we get to sort of the middle, once you're there, you've overcome all those obstacles. How do we maximize the interview with the customer, right? We have this opportunity, a half an hour is usually what I tell people, although it often goes longer if possible, to sort of get what you can. So this is something probably as content marketers, we're probably fairly familiar with this concept of the storytelling kind of hero's journey, right? But I use this in the back of my mind when I'm talking to a customer and I'm asking them about their experiences. So in short, you starting from a place of status quo, life before they ever met your brand, there was some kind of call, some kind of trigger. It could have been, external, or it could have been internal within their company, but it was something changed that made them look around for a solution. They meet you, right? You enter the picture, and then they've got this sort of a little bit up and down, right? If I could put more ups and downs there in this slide, I would. They have to sort of cross over to saying, all right, I'm gonna buy into this solution. There's gonna be some ups and downs of making that decision, of implementing it, of getting buy-in, of reaching the success that I want, determining the requirements, all those things. So there's that part of the story. And then at the end, there's this new normal. This is the vision that they had hopefully at the beginning, or that you've helped them paint, to say, after I've been through all this, this is how I measure success. This is how I know that I'm successful, and what I tell my boss, yeah, was worth it. So I try to sort of walk through sort of these steps when I'm talking to them. And the most important thing I would say are the things on the end, right? Because that's where the comparison, the before and after, comes into the picture. Where were you before? And now in this new promised land of the new normal, what's changed? So even if you're asking for a testimonial quote and you want to just put something one line on your website, that's the piece that I think is the most interesting, is here's what's changed. Here's where I were. And now this is the piece that's different from before. That's like the shortest possible story that you could tell. I work with a lot of journalists, and so I've taken, some of my best practices from things that journalists learn through journalism school and sort of their hard-fought work in interviewing many people. So these are some of the things that they've told me and that I've learned from them in best practices in asking, in conducting interviews with case study customers. Open-ended questions. Right? Not yes, no questions. Pushing for specific examples. And I think that's something that, you find later, if you didn't ask for that, you look back at your notes and you say, there's nothing really juicy or interesting here. It's those details and those examples that, that really make it an interesting and engaging story. So if they say something interesting, I just wasn't as productive before. You might ask a follow-up question like, can you give me an example of how that might play out, right? And just to sort of get them to give you the, the juicy nuggets behind a very blanket statement. This is something, honestly, I do this way too often. If I have to work on one thing, it's not asking two questions at the same time. Like, don't ask the second follow-up question when you're still asking the first. Pace yourself and give them a chance to answer the first one at a time, which also means getting comfortable with silence. That sometimes they're just thinking, especially if you're on the phone and you can't see them, give them a chance to sort of think before you kind of jump in and say, that's okay. I mean, if you can't think of anything right now, or get to the next question, just give them a minute to come to themselves and kind of come up with something. And then, listening, being willing to sort of stray a little bit from your script and go down a little bit of a road to ask that follow-up question, not be in such a hurry to just, get through your list and check everything off, because sometimes that's where you find That's where you find the really interesting part of the story. And I'm okay with if we don't get every single question on the list answered, if we come up with something that's really distinctive and will make a great story that can be told and retold. I have, and this is in the deck, but I'm happy to provide it separately too if you want, sort of my standard list of questions and how I kind of group them, kind of the background of your purchase, how are you using the product, what results did you have, and then advice for others. I found that sometimes I ask a very similar question in a slightly different way to try to sort of get to a different angle of the story. Maybe the first time I asked it didn't quite work, or I'm just circling back around. So I pulled out 3 of my favorite questions that I ask. And I try to ask them in a way that can be very specific. Now, that's something I found that if you ask a really very general question, like if you ask, why did you choose this product, right? You're going to get an answer. But if you say it, think back to that day when you decided that you had to make a change, right? We think back to sort of that buyer's journey. There was that trigger. What was really different about that day? And why didn't you make that change sooner? See, I just asked 2 different questions. So you might hold that second question, right? After they ask the first question. But when they think back to that, suddenly they're brought back. They're brought back to that moment, right? When they were going through those choices, and they're able to answer that question just in a different way with more colorful detail than if they just said sort of the blanket statement that was very generalized. And then we get to the fun part. So the output, you've got all your notes, you've got, your process is set. And now we're talking about, what do we do with all this juicy detail? So I've got about 3 to 4 different examples of ways that we could use a case study in both the marketing and the sales process. So one is the sales deck, a slide within the sales deck. So, the 2 in back are examples from companies that this is their style. It's not necessarily my choice. I think it's a bit of an eye chart, but for companies that, they use this deck as something that they hand out and people are sitting there, reading this, or if they're sending it ahead to somebody who is going to read it on their own, this is one way to present basically the whole story in a slide format. Personally, I prefer the one in front where you've got a quote, you've got a name, you've got a little bit of the story. And then I think that when people see themselves sort of reflected in the picture of the real customer, they feel a little bit more affinity and they trust that, hey, this is a real person. So, this is actually a screenshot from a video. This is not his profile shot from LinkedIn. It's something that makes him really look like a real person who sat and had this conversation with us. So I tend to go, and all of them have a quote as sort of the highlighted piece. This one over here, I like that there's a headline because truly, if you want to read the detail, you read the detail, but at least you get the headline and the key takeaway. So this is the typical, 2-page PDF case study that we all know and love. But what I like about this one, I chose this as an example because it's so skimmable. You've got sort of your data points over here, the headline right away, the quote that you zoom in on. I think this is, if you're going to do a 2-pager, like for print at an event or again as a handout, that's a good kind of use case for a 2-pager. Otherwise, it can be more worthwhile to just make it into a web page that is more SEO friendly, crawlable, easily navigable from within your website without having to download something and make the user kind of switch gears. So I've seen both of these be successful for different types of scenarios. Other ways that are taking the same kind of information, but either repackaging or repurposing them in different ways, are storytelling format blogs. So I know you can't read all the detail, but I'll just show, this is one example of the awards program that we talked about before. And this is one from one of my cybersecurity clients. Okay, so the one on the left, I'll just kind of read the first sentence to you and kind of the example, maybe the first paragraph to show you what I mean. Okay. So a prospective first-generation college student wanted to attend a community college 300 miles away. He needed help applying for financial aid and finding housing. Devoted family members supported him throughout his journey and even surprised him with supplies for his new apartment. And then there's another example. And then we have this sentence. These are just two of the inspiring stories we've had the privilege to hear from applicants for Hobson's annual Education Advances Awards. So we get people, you know, we have a little snippet from that blog, from that case study, the story that we heard, and that engages people right off the bat. And then we have, so I don't know if you've ever heard this term, I learned this from my journalist friends also, it's called a nut graph. So the nut graph is this sentence. These are just two of the inspiring stories we've had the privilege to hear. Because it's saying, okay, this is actually what the theme of this blog is. And then they go on to talk about, you know, other stories that are very similar and other ways that you can use the product and so on and so forth. But we've got sort of that snippet of the featurey kind of storytelling to get people's engagement up front. This is very similar with the cybersecurity one. Bank United, Ann Gorman first tried to inventory her company service accounts. She was flying blind, right? Then we have a quote from her, and then we say, Bank United's struggle with account sprawl is familiar to companies of many different types, right? So we've kind of grounded this story. So it's not just about the customer, it's actually about sort of the universal experience that our buyers are going through. Okay, so the last example that I wanted to talk about is videos. So as you can probably tell, I'm a writer. I'm not a video person. And so this is maybe like 10% of the case studies that I personally develop are videos. But I went to this session. I know it has like a weird title over here. I went to the session a couple of years ago with Andrew Davis. It was at the Content Marketing Conference, which is in Boston. And honestly, it was the best session I had ever attended. I mean, I'm literally still talking about this 2 years later and still thinking about what this guy said. So if you have a chance to get, he's got a couple different videos and he talks about this thing called the mystery box. Okay, so I'll let you watch the video for yourself, but essentially he's about building anticipation. And you know, this is for the person who said that she wrote in television, I bet you're probably very good at this. And he sort of overlaid what a television show takes as sort of their storytelling format to keep you watching. And he overlaid that to how a customer case study could be done. So he took the example of the show called Ice Truckers, which is like this reality show where these people get in their truck and they're like going through Alaska, right? And they have something they have to deliver. And then along the way, they run into all kinds of problems, right? The ice is cracking and the truck might fall through, right? And then they solve that problem. But then the heat in the truck dies, or, you know, like it's like up and down and up and down. And you're just dying to know, did they make it across the ice to their destination in Alaska? So what he does, Andrew Davis, he takes this and then he literally live edited on the stage an example of a case study that one of his clients had to make it more like the ice truckers story, okay? So instead of saying, you know, like so many video case studies. I'm Bob and I'm from the University of Pennsylvania. We were established in 1783 and served 10,000 customers. Our mission, according to our president, right? Nobody cares about that. You've already clicked off, you've already turned off, right? Instead of that, he says, show the vision of success early on and then get people in this trouble, like the ice truckers, as quickly as possible. You've got to get that action, you know, right away to get people's attention, to get them to keep watching. And then creating that emotional connection so that there's buy-in, and keeping that anticipation going by actually letting the customer say, I had ups and downs, you know, this was a real life experience. I had to get buy-in, you know, then we had the implementation, so I had to drive adoption. Like, these are real struggles that people go through. So let them talk about their struggles, because then you're showing your customers that people were able to overcome them. Yeah. So without, you know, stealing all his, I would just recommend checking that out. So I tried to follow his advice when, you know, I did my next case study video after watching that. So, and these were my results. So this is a cybersecurity company. We often interview systems administrators who are sort of like the IT help desk folks, you know, unsung heroes of IT organizations. And so at the top is a guy, he's from the state of Indiana. He's their system administrator. And at the bottom are the 3 previous videos that we had done, similar stories just from different organizations, right? And so I'm not going to play it for you just because of time and the connectivity, although I'll give you the link, but I'll tell you sort of, you know, absolutely our style was much more like, you know, we were founded in 1783 and we have 10,000 students, and, you know, beautiful B-roll shots of the campus, that kind of stuff. So when we went to the Brent Collier interview, and we had all that footage, but he said something really interesting, you know, about 3/4 of the way through. He said, I used to get calls at 4 o'clock in the morning from, you know, our developers, because they were working on something, but it was my job, because I had the keys to let them into these privileged systems. I had to be the one to let them into the system, and then I had to shadow them for the 2 hours while they were doing their work to keep tabs on them. You know, now I get to sleep through the night. So when you think about editing that video, you put that at the front. Maybe you start with, now I get to sleep through the night. Or you start with, I used to have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, and basically my life was awful because I never knew when I was going to get that call. Now we have something kind of interesting and intriguing. So these are my results on the right. We use you know, some Vimeo tracking where we can tell the engagement, how far people watched the video, you know, and so at every state we saw that this video exceeded the expectations of the average of the 3 videos we had done before, in terms of, you know, the 10%, the 25%, and so on. At each mark, more people were continuing to watch through that video, you know, all the way to the 90% at the end. So I've found that case studies are a great way to make all of your content stronger. I've used them to rebuild and build into, you know, the infrastructure that I talked about at the beginning. A lot of different ways to sort of explain how your customers think and talk, reflecting their words back at them. All right. So we build empathy maps based on the material that we've gained from case studies. We build personas that talk about all their challenges and their traits and their vision of success, you know, and then all these types of, you know, nuggets and testimonials and just the perspective of the customer all feed into any type of sales and marketing material that you do, from inbound marketing to sales tools and sales enablement materials that your sales teams use. So that's the end of my part of the presentation. I'd love to hear what you guys think, and are there things you've learned or challenges that you've faced on your side when handling case studies?
Margie, it was really good. Thank you. Really educational.
Thanks. Glad you liked
Quick
it.
question, and then on one piece of feedback. So yeah, the addition I would put to your reporters' questions is get numbers. So you said get details, but really you kind of have to get them thinking in advance before you show up. On, you know, how do you calculate some of these benefits is the challenge, I think. And then what's the wired RFP versus a normal RFP?
So let me just say that the asking the numbers, that's actually an excellent point. And you know, you saw in some of the examples that I brought up that that's something that if you have them, you can kind of put front and center. So one thing that I sometimes do is I will send some questions ahead of time. I never send that whole list. But I will ask that question ahead of time in just an email to say, these are the kind of things we're going to discuss. So that they can at least start thinking and preparing. Otherwise, they're caught off guard, and it's very difficult for them to answer that.
And I broke the rule about those 2 questions. The
wired. No, that's okay. But you didn't ask them at the same time. So, it's funny, the wired RFP. So what makes it wired is you're giving a sampled RFP, right, to a customer to say, hey, these are the questions that you should ask when you're shopping for solutions, right, or putting your RFP together. But really, you're including the questions that your company is going to have a great answer for.
Yeah,
that's
it's
what makes it wired. Yeah, right.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Thank you.
Margie, there was oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Margie, that was great. And a lot of what you were talking about resonated, especially with the challenges of getting some of these done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you, I mean, because I think the responsibility piece really is critical, right? Is, content team can write and produce and so on, but when it comes to sourcing, that seems to be the biggest issue.
Yeah. So it depends on the size of the company, right? I think it's often a product marketing responsibility if there's a product marketing team, or a customer success team responsibility. But I mean, I work with companies that go from like, I don't know, $50 million to whatever, $1 billion. And I feel like it's only at maybe the like $300 million mark that they even start to have those functions. So if you don't have those kinds of functions, then it might just have to be somebody within the content team or the demand gen, team that just gets tapped to do it.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
So Margie, we're close to the top of the hour. There are a couple more questions that I can ask you. I just wanted to check, are you able to go a little bit past the top of the hour if needed?
Yeah, I can for sure. Sorry,
okay, we had a very active chat while you were speaking.
Oh, okay. And I wasn't looking at that at all.
Yeah,
so.
okay. And I'm going to break your rule and ask you 2 questions because they came up. The 2 questions were, is there a typical length for a case study? And the second question was, if the client doesn't agree, what do you feel about an anonymously sourced case study? And is there an impact on that versus when you are naming the client?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, the 2-pager is the 2-pager, right? So it's, maybe ends up being like 500 words total, right? That's sort of front back. Same with a blog, somewhere between, like around 800, 1,000 words, just as sort of I look at for most kinds of material. I think if there had so much that you just like have this plethora of information, maybe you just find ways to use different pieces in different ways. I think like a video, I mean, that was one of the points about the ice truckers thing, was it's not about the length. Like we've been blaming customers for having these really short attention spans, but really we have to take some of the responsibility that we're just creating boring content that people don't want to watch, right? So I don't get as worried about like, oh, it has to be 90 seconds or something. If you're telling a good story, people will watch it. And then to your second question about, yeah, I have really mixed feelings about that. I mean, I don't know. I have clients that say, that's okay, we'll just call it a large manufacturing company. I mean, I guess if you have no choice and you've already done all the work and there's still an interesting story, you want to use it in some way. But I would still sort of push for a variety where you've got some names that you can still name.
Anyone else have a question to ask?
Well, I do, but I think mine's maybe worthy of another webinar or what have you, presentation. I had some success with positioning a thought leader customer and having him produce the content as well, and then distributing it, in a demand gen way, which had great success both for the customer and for us. But it's the Afurious content calendar. How does one efficiently take that precious customer material and disperse it among teams? And we're talking pre-sales teams, we're talking demand gen teams, we're talking post-sale, all of that. So I don't know. I'm sure it's not going to be a brief answer, but I just wondered if there were some efficiencies that could happen, like you mentioned with the checklist at the onset.
Yeah, if you have any kind of internal like sales resource center, right, in an intranet or in some kind of a searchable format where you can, if I have a library of case studies, I have some sort of metadata attached to them, right? Like what is the product they're talking about? What is the industry they're talking about? Sometimes there's a use case, right? Maybe there's a persona, like whatever sort of your content taxonomy organization is. Yeah, and I tag them. Yep. And I also do that on an external facing website, like sort of a resource center, right? So that it's not just the case study section. And this is sort of a side thing, but like it's like a nit that I find like nobody really cares what format your stuff is. They're not searching in terms of it's a case study or it's an ebook or it's an infographic. They actually care about the topic. So I try to do resource centers where it's by topic, and then you might have a case study right next to an ebook, but they're both about enhancing productivity, right? So, and I think I have found that the internal teams, no matter how awesome you make those sales resource centers, they still go to the external website to find the content, just like a customer does. So I think it's worth putting the effort into the external facing stuff because you're internal people.
Yeah.
Well,
I have two platforms. Yeah, I guess ultimately. Thanks.
On that note, I think we are out of time. So Margie, thanks for joining us. Oh, one last thing. Where can people go to find you if they want to connect with you, Margie?
Yeah, so please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch with people, definitely be back to the group. So here, we've got last slide.
Oh, great.
It's thanks for the intro. So my website is Centerboard Marketing. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And I have a book that is about developing a brand personality. And there's a kind of a shortcut if you want to check out there's a free guide that goes along with the book that's at brand-breakthrough.com, which you can just download, and a great way to sort of get started on your own definition.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for joining us, Margie. And
Thanks
everyone else, stay safe, and you'll find us here every Thursday. So come on back every Thursday.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Take care.
Thanks so much.